Hey, good morning, everyone. Matt
Hey, good
from
morning.
Valiant here with George
Hey, good morning, everybody.
and Megan.
Hello, good morning. Happy Thursday.
Yeah, it's Thursday. It's February 10th, so we're a third of the way, or a little more than the third of the way into the month. Everything's going by really quickly this year. I feel like we're going to be talking about spring in just a few weeks. I mean, I guess it's about 6 weeks away, but still, it feels like it's going to get here sooner, and I'm excited about that. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Let's go through the usual. We are Valiant Technology. We're a managed IT services provider located in New York City, but we've got a nationwide reach. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about what we do or our services, you could always reach us at thevaliantway.com. And if you're watching this, you're probably on LinkedIn having a cup of coffee or on YouTube right now. And if not, you could always visit us on our YouTube channel for more videos, not just our live streams, but tutorials, informational videos that we create specifically for small businesses. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about small businesses, most specifically. Never get that word right. It's taken a long time. We're going to cover a brief history of workplace collaboration. You know, it's something that is ubiquitous within our lives these days because so many people work from home. And I don't know. I don't know if you guys agree, but it feels like the word collaboration has really kind of become a buzzword over the past couple of years. It's a valuable buzzword. It's not one that doesn't hold value. It's not like we're sitting here screaming synergy at the top of our lungs or any one of those other business 2.0.
Outside the box.
Ooh, outside the box, each side of the box. We take a step back from the box.
The cloud.
Yes, which is just a box.
It really is just a box. It's someone else's box.
data center.
Yes.
Which we do have a live stream on that.
Yep, if you're curious.
And so anyway, today we're going to talk about workplace collaboration and not what's going on with it right now, but where did it come from? You know, it's something that has a really long history, and we're going to cover that today, hopefully in about 28 minutes, 27 minutes. We'll see if we can keep under the half-hour limit here.
Exactly.
So let's just get right into it. You know, I got some statistics that I wanted to go over with you guys really quickly to kind of set things up, and it also gives us a chance to put some graphics up on screen, which is always fun. You know, there's an organization called the National Council on Compensation Insurance, and we put their website up really quickly so we can have that for everyone to check out. And they released a report last year with some numbers that may or may not be interesting depending on what it is that each person has experienced throughout the past couple of years in the workplace. But let's go over those for a couple seconds. You know, before the pandemic, only 6% of people employed primarily worked from home, and about 3/4 of people have never done it before. Like,
Right.
never worked remotely, or at least in their home. And by May 2020, over a third of the of folks that are employed were working out of their homes. And I mean, that shift is huge. But I think what's more interesting here is that that 1/3 number is close to pre-pandemic estimates as to what workforces could do remotely in the first place.
Right. It makes perfect sense. It actually, yeah, you know, it's interesting. It correlated, you know, if you read some of the earlier reports and other data, was that we kind of jumped about 10 years of remote slash hybrid work. It was where things were going. So I know here at Valiant and a lot of our customers were set up to work remotely, and that was our kind of or location agnostic, maybe the best way of looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
And but it really, I mean, the pandemic has fast forwarded it by order of magnitude is years.
Oh, so it was an absolute quantum leap in things. And what's interesting, and I was really happy that I found this, but I found a desk that I had here at the house back in 2006, and it was fully built for remote work. You know, you can see I've got my two screens. Great. Oh, look at that Windows XP and Outlook 2003. It feels so old now. But, you know, I've got my virtual machines in there. I'm connecting over a VPN connection. The telephone on the desk is a voice over IP phone that connected to a phone system in my office. So a lot of the technology, the hardware, the method of transport was there, but the real collaboration tools had not really gotten to where they need to be yet.
That's actually the really big difference. The collaboration tools, and also I think, I mean, I hate using the word mindset, but like the systems and the mindset of working remotely and decentralized, delocated working, you know, and a lot of it has to do with this, you know, when we look back at some of these things we'll talk about shortly, it has to do with like workforce kind of norms that may
And
or may not have been
culture.
good, but they were how it was done.
Yeah.
Is actually in some ways looking at it.
Well,
Yeah.
just to kind of go back to some of what we were saying with the compliance episodes about just getting started, you can't create an ideal situation unless you have something to work with. And I think that a lot of what we're going to cover from the 1800s until, MC Hammer's pants became in vogue. Is that too much? That was too much.
A little too much.
That was just right. I think that was just right.
All right.
We're going to get to the era of
Well,
Dan Cortez and talk about how workplace collaboration has been over the next couple of decades into the future. But let's really jump into this. I don't want to start making too many references to the 90s till we actually hit the 90s. Workplace collaboration is something that is not new by any means. It's something that spanned back to the 1800s. I mean, think about what else was going on in the 1800s. Well, bread was invented. I don't know. What do we have?
Well, it was the Industrial Revolution. It was the first Industrial Revolution, right?
Yeah. Overseas, mostly in Europe, and that's actually where the dedicated workspace came from. As businesses started to grow and globalization became a thing, there was a need for people to be in the same room to share information and ideas, to share things like paperwork, contracts, documentation. We can't think about those as being files on a server. We can't even think about those being files in a filing cabinet at that point. There was probably a room in a warehouse someplace where there were people working, in all areas outside of it. And that is really what caused the need to have dedicated workspaces.
Right. These things weren't necessarily new for the world. There was, I think some of the earliest forms of human writing was like a contract under a bill in cuneiform.
Taxes,
something along those lines. But I think that it became much more critical as the world got more fast and the communications went over longer distances, and it became a specialization. It wasn't just something that someone did. It became a separate job to collaborate and collect these pieces of information and organize them in a way that is repeatable and usable.
Oof, look at that. We're getting to scalability, and we're hitting the valley.
I'm more thinking about the CIA triad: accessibility.
Yeah. There were a lot of things that happened after this kind of like initial establishment of the workspace that really contributed to the ability to use it efficiently. I mean, in the 1830s and 40s, we had the telegraph, telephone, the typewriter, and all of those are descendants of what we use today: the cell phone, the computer, everything else. And that being able to have this information that's able to be worked with also remove the need to have your factory workers and your information workers in the same place, which further dedicated this workspace as we talk about it to information workers.
Right.
Now, George, I know information workers is a term that you like to use when we're talking, and it's a good one. So why don't you help us define it really quickly?
So it's one of those ones you can get yourself in trouble pretty easily with, but roughly speaking, an information or knowledge worker is someone that does work not necessarily in the physical world, but collecting, disseminating, creating knowledge or data points, and they work with data. If you're in the classic example of the knowledge worker would be a lawyer. They're working with contracts, they're working with reviewing laws. Some of it's physical, you're in court, but a lot of law work, if you ever work with lawyers, they're kind of by themselves banging away on reading documents and briefs and depositions, that sort of thing. Another example would be like a marketer. A lot of marketing work is done in quiet and done, creating a marketing plan, creating an execution, delivering a service. So in a lot of ways, a lot of service work, which kind of almost goes back to that earlier statistic you put out, about 33% of the work being work from home is services, like, delivering services, professional or otherwise. I think it's the best way to think is it's not physical work. Like a bricklayer or a mason would not be something you consider a knowledge worker, even though they have a lot of knowledge.
It's not manual work.
It's not manual work. It's not physical work. You can and it's just a distinction between what kind of tools and what kind of needs they have are sort of different than you're kind of in office, like hospitality. You have to know a lot and be a chef. It's a really complex, hard job. But you're cooking food. Like, you have to make it. You have to deliver it.
You're executing a workflow in a repeated manner.
Correct. In a physical space. Knowledge work doesn't have that. And it's interesting because knowledge work people generally will work longer in life as knowledge workers. You don't have to retire per se. If you ever had gone to a college professor class and the person's 75 or 80 years old, not to knock older professors, I think they're great, but it's not like you don't see that many people that age doing like physical labor. It's just
It's theoretical at that point.
Right.
And I think it's an achievement to get to that point in life where everything can be expressed in the theoretical sense. I think it's odd. I mean, getting a little older, that's something I'm looking forward to being like, oh, well, back in my day, we had, so and so.
Don't worry, we'll get back on my day soon with Lotus Notes. Anyway.
Just really quickly, I wanted to throw it out there because it was on my mind all week last week, but one of the best innovations from like this 30s, 40s time period that we're talking about from the 1800s, or even a little bit later, was the establishment of the pneumatic tube as a method of transport within businesses.
Yeah.
We used to have the dime banks in New York when the drive-through would have like the little tube, and someone in the house would be like depositing a check, and I would jump right across to the driver's side window so I could play with the pneumatics.
That was my favorite thing too as a kid. We would go to the drive-through at the bank, and my mom would put her check in, and we were like, "Oh, I felt like the Jetsons or something."
Which is great because we're going to be talking about the Jetsons in a couple of minutes. But so there's all these great innovations. They also supported for future innovations. And while this is a little off topic, some of these are why we have the assembly line. And when you think about it that way, some of these innovations had an influence on the cars that are in our driveways and are on the roads today.
Everything you use is generally made on an assembly line, right? I mean, handcrafted things are pretty unusually rare, unusual at this point. They're specialty items.
Specialty and incredibly expensive to produce because you can't do it in mass. But anyway, let's fast forward to the 1900s, get a little closer to a closer time.
The 20th century.
Yes, 20th century. Frank Lloyd Wright, he produced the open plan office in 1906. And it's weird to say 1906. It feels like such a long time ago when you look at Frank Lloyd Wright's architectural work and everything else that he's done over the years and seen how modern and forward thinking it is. Unfortunately, and this is a matter of opinion, but I think that the idea of the open floor office or open office plan was filled with good intentions, but really was not the best thing in the world. It doesn't work for everybody.
It doesn't work for. It depends on the kind of work you do. I think there's a lot of backlash recently against it in the past couple of years, especially in the last 2 years with the pandemic. Return to office is very different than. Thank you. Hey, Drew, what's going on? Is exactly right. Amano Domine. So I think it's very much like there is a back, and also if you have to do quiet work, concentration work, it's very hard to do in an open office. I mean, you are most open offices people wearing seas of headphones.
Oh yeah, like I enjoy my space in the office. It's one of the open areas, but there have definitely been 1-2 days where I just get up and I want to scream, run, and hide for a couple minutes to get a thought out. And there's also Taylorism, the idea of dividing spaces into very specific tasks.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of a solution to the open floor plan, or at least the opposite. But it also, when applied to an open floor plan, leads to office spaces that are just entirely too grid-like in nature, and they have this certain level of sterility, and it feels like a space with I guess absolutely no entropy, meaning everything is so evenly spaced apart and exactly where it needs to be that it doesn't feel like a place where something's going to get done. And to make things a little bit worse, of course, there were technologies at the time designed to make us more comfortable that really didn't. Air conditioning systems weren't quite as good as they are nowadays. Lighting was different. I mean, quite frankly, some lighting can really, really mess with your eyes. And again, that's why I love the LEDs we have at work, because they're great to work underneath. If you work underneath a fluorescent tube that's running at a frequency that our brains can't quite handle, we're going to get headaches. We're going to notice the flickering. And that was everywhere.
Right. And I mean, also, like, fast forward a couple of years from now, when people were working with fluorescent lights and computers, it really exacerbated it. It was different when you're working on paper, but now all of a sudden when you're working on like screens running at different frequencies, refresh rates,
Absolutely.
and 60 hertz noise and all that sort of stuff. So it's definitely interesting. And I think that you have to look back at those periods of time, and what was being done was significantly different than it is today. That's a really important thing. So the open office plan, when it was first initially thought of, was very different why it was thought of than it is now. Now it's kind of like, well, how do we stuff as many people into a given space? Whereas at it was to be efficient.
Well, there's that, and there's also that the world has simply gotten smaller because of technology.
Right.
You know, we don't necessarily need that much space to get certain things done anymore, and we're going to get onto that in a minute. But let's just jump into where the term workplace collaboration came from. Finally, it was a term that was coined in the 1950s. So here we are, middle of the 20th century, and it was coined as methods of project management, because the idea of project management grew to include multiple people in a position where they were making decisions for the rest of the group. We weren't working in situations where there was an individual that was sort of like the what's not start of authority, single source of truth with regards to a project anymore. You had people sharing responsibilities,
right?
And
well, as you get more and more complex, right? As you have more and more complex environments and buildings, you need more and more people. That's the whole idea of a Gantt chart, if you think about it.
Exactly. And around 10 years later, whenever, the 1960, we're going to give a firm date on that one, the Project Management Institute recognized workplace collaboration as a successful workplace practice. So, you know, the tires were kicked. It was something that was realistic and made good sense to the workplace, to the point where you wanted to be able to easily explain those terms so they could be adopted and improved upon. And that's exactly what happened. And I'm going to leave this to George, because I don't want to butcher any language other than English. I love that. That's great. But another language.
The Bürolandschaft.
Wait, can we get one more time?
Bürolandschaft.
Thank you. Which means roughly translates to office landscaping in German. And that was a bit of a trend that took place in Europe, with their own kind of ideas behind exactly what was going on in other parts of the world, including the United States. And, you know, I think it's great to kind of look back and understand what had led up to sort of like the steps before the gigantic boom of workplace collaboration over a 30-year period, starting in like the 1990s.
Right.
So it's nice to look back and go, you know, pneumatic tubes, typewriters, fluorescent lights, just the fact that everyone's working in a space together. That's where all this came from.
Right. And the other thing that's really interesting, I think we've forgotten, just looking, is how much storage you need for paper back in the old days. Offices had massive storage spaces for paper, or you had to have a place to store paper and documents outside the office. And, you know, Matt, you know, how many banker's boxes have you filled in over your life?
I'm having flashbacks right now of like, you know, old like stationary rooms that would be a legitimate room that a person or two could work in there with desks, and it was nothing but like pens, paper, the boxes that you were mentioning, the accountant boxes and everything else. And I just realized, wow, we don't have any of that at work.
Yeah.
Most people don't have that at all. And I think that brings us to the 90s, where we had this strange intersection of both of those workplace needs. Like we still had a sea of paper, an ocean of paper to like flow on, but there was a lot of change in terms of like wiring and wires and computers. And, you know, up until the 90s, I mean, computers were on desks, sort of.
I was watching Seinfeld the other day, and I know, like, George is, you know, working at the Yankees. He doesn't have a computer on his desk. Like, he's just shuffling papers around, and you know. And I was like, this
Costanza thing.
It's very Costanza. He would also just be like, I don't want to, you know. He would also
sleep under his desk
to make his job worse. But it is interesting, because you think of the 90s as incredibly like contemporary sometimes, but also the fact that it was sort of this old world workspace.
It was at that time where things were still overlapping very significantly. You know, for us, when we worked in advertising or in production, like sort of production, you know, you still had folks that were like from the old school, like, you know, photography side of it and production, where fonts actually meant like a piece of a font.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, like a piece of thing, and then, you know, you have this kind of like you know, desktop publishing revolution in the late 80s, early 90s. And all the skills you learned are not necessarily the same skills, but they overlap, and they were, you know, I'm going to throw
they're reinterpreted. You're seeing things in different ways. Right. I had a conversation with someone in the MSP community recently about kerning, and I was like, hold on a second, you worry about this. You ever done typesetting? And then it was like that moment of, oh, you've been doing this for so long, I don't want to have this conversation, because that is around that time when I started learning about some of what I do today. But yeah, look, the technology was being introduced. Things were getting smaller, wireless networking, yes, late 1990s is when that actually started to happen, started making it easier for workers to be able to step away from their cubicles, the bullpens that they sat in, and sit down next to a coworker and get some work done.
Yeah.
And I remember the first couple of times I did that after getting like my first little laptop wireless card, and it was such a freeing thing not to have like the small cubicle walls around. At the same time, groupware was something that was really beginning to take off, and that when I hear groupware, obviously a few different products come to mind. Some of the modern stuff that we work with today, but there's also sort of like the forerunners of it, the ancients, the Lotus Notes, and the
and Drew threw out there, ping me on Same Time. I mean, Same Time was like their first chat application. I remember when Slack, if you start talking, I was like, this is Same Time. Literally, it's Same Time.
It's all IRC.
It was an integrated system, and all that. It was you could see so much, and the whole idea of presence, like, oh, is someone there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, can I get in touch with them? I remember setting that up years and years ago, and at first people were like, this is dumb, I'll just call you.
Yeah.
And now it's like, now I guess when I call you is like a much more complicated process. It's
absolutely. But the thing is that what we're using now is something that really started to emerge in the late 1980s, hit the office places really in the early 1990s. And I had a cool fact in here that the term groupware was coined in 1978, defined as an intentional group process plus software to support them. I don't even remember writing that, but that is fascinating. Let's fast forward into the 21st century. We've gone from the 1800s all the way to the 21st century today. 2000s is really where co-working became a thing. Technology used in the workplace continued to evolve. I remember, in 2001 going from like having this gigantic 19-inch monitor that probably weighed like 30 or 40 pounds over to a small LCD. And it was mind blowing because how much space I had on my desk to make a mess of again. The amount of space that you would reclaim through technology was amazing.
Nature abhors a vacuum. You found ways to fill it with stuff.
Oh,
everyone does.
Of course. Absolutely.
Or what happens is
some passwords everywhere.
But desk got much smaller as you got more like the LCDs and less paper.
Increased density in a workplace, you're getting more value for your square footage that you're paying if you can double the amount of staff in a room, right?
Correct. And you think about the average desk used to be what, 60, 120 inches, 84 inches, 7 feet wide.
Yeah.
Like in terms of depth, and you have blotters and returns and all this basket, in and out basket, memos.
All this 1980s desk excess.
Right.
It had to be shaved away. And aside from like the office technology, mobile devices began to have forms of functionality that were really, really useful. Like we were talking about Sony having, I think, one of the first mobile phones that supported IMAP. And it was like, wow, I can actually have synchronized email on my mobile phone. And yeah, it'll take 30 minutes for me to respond saying, be right back. But it was pretty nice to have. And it was a sign of the things to come.
I mean, the Treo, which was based on Palm.
Screen Treo, yes.
They were cool. I mean, they're awesome. Then BlackBerry came out, and there were some great Microsoft products, or original ActiveSync products, and Motorola.
Windows Mobile, HP had the Granada line of mini kind of like handheld PDA/computery kind of things. There were all these, I hate to say it this way, but toys at one time, because everything had a novelty to it because they were trying to figure out what was going on.
The Sidekick. You haven't heard that in a long time, I'm sure.
Hello, George. I know where you're at. Do you know where I'm at? Boop, boop. Anyway, but I guess what we're getting at is being tied to a desk wasn't as critical as it used to be.
Yeah.
And that leads to increasing mobility. And just as a side note, so did Starbucks. Like everyone started working in these places, and it became a little bit more commonplace. I think it was the treat at one time to be outside the office and have a meeting, and then all of a sudden it started to become the norm in a lot of ways. And that's also what led to hot desking. It's hot desking isn't something I had learned about till I was younger, about how IBM would go with the hot desking as a method to really organize their workspaces. And it just means that you're not given an official desk. There's a work area, there are open spots, you come in, you sit down with your stuff, you get your work done, you remove your things, and you leave. Right. And, I'm not a big fan of it, but I could see where it has its uses. That said, 2010. The 2010s, or what do we call those? The aughts or something? What is that? The 20?
I think the aughts. I think that's what.
Zero. Aughts is 0, 01 to the teens.
So the teens? We just call it the teens.
Teens. It was the awkward years of the
teens.
century.
Yeah, the teens.
And that's when social media came out. A lot of that kind of changed how business operated and interacted with their customers and their audiences. A lot of that, along with the .com boom of the 2000s, that's a time I'd rather not remember, led to office spaces needing to be cool. You had to have the arcade machine with NBA Jam, or you had to have the ping pong table or the unlimited snacks or whatever it was. And, those aren't really actual workplace features. They're perks, but at the same time, we had more things like dedicated meeting spaces that balance out the open floor plans. We had virtual offices, breakout rooms.
Phone booth. The phone booth in an office space is now, I haven't gotten, I go to a lot of offices still, even today, and that's a feature you'll see a lot of offices. They even have ones you can buy that are like kind of all encapsulated all in one that you can drop in. I find it a little weird. It has a kind of get smart vibe to it, cone of silence. But it's a very strange, but same token, no one really wants to hear your conversation with your doctor.
Yeah.
Or I don't, or you may, I don't want you to hear my conversation with my doctor.
I don't want you guys to know how many times I order a burrito for lunch in the office in a given week,
Yes. I also think it's just funny that it's sort of a return. The phone booth was like thought of as obsolete, and now we're kind of just going back for the same need. It's like not exactly the same technology, but it's the same need.
Well, it's also like, what's a payphone? Why is it in these things? I don't understand how this works. We need to come up with a new name for one of those. It's just an isolation chamber or something like that.
Right.
But speaking of isolation chamber, there was a lot of work that went into like incorporating ways for people to be able to relax and harness their creativity. And I think that led to a lot more flair in the workplace. Lack of a better term, I always like to default to flair. Thank you, Mike Judge. Even things like office furniture improved. Not only the aesthetics, but the way that they took the way that the seats cradle our bodies and how we distribute weight and how we do a lot of other things. And those are all contributions to the workplace that make it easier to collaborate. You have a place where you can think, you can be comfortable, you can work with people, have ideas, have disagreements, whatever it is, you're doing it face to face. And that makes a huge difference. And of course, now here we are in the 2020s. We're basically here at the you are here moment in the timeline. And that's when collaboration kicked into full gear, whether we were ready for it or not. It was happening. It got kind of like a Leroy Jenkins kind of a thing. Everyone's planning. This guy just storms through the wall and it's here. Here's collab. Hey, Office 365.
I think the pieces have been there for years. It's just that the need became really real with the pandemic, and I think that it really proved that we didn't need to have this physical space, but in the end, I think we really want a physical space. I mean, it's really a 100% virtual company is a really tough. I think it can be a tough proposition for a lot of people to work at. Never seen your coworkers, never meeting them in person, never having any of the social aspects of it. And sometimes getting face to face and a meeting can get so much done in half an hour or an hour versus virtual. I think the other thing that we I think we should, one day one of our future episodes, or maybe some collaboration etiquette, which would be a really useful thing to talk about.
I mean, that's going to be one where I don't say too much. I'll let you guys drive that.
No,
I would love to.
That's rude.
That. Yeah.
But all right. So back to that. I want to try and get us done here in the next few minutes. Cloud-based innovations start showing up. Yes, they were around earlier. I remember using things in 2007, 2008, but now they were actually being used because they needed to be, and not because it was just a neat thing to have. And services that were seen as groupware, like the Lotus Notes and Exchange and all those kinds of packages, they just no longer needed to be in a physical location. And that was something that people learned very quickly as well.
Also, I think the big thing too is a bit of like the democratization of it, where it became more ubiquitous to every person, every size company, where anyone could, for a fair, I mean, if you think about what you get from like a Google Workspace or Office 365 or so many of these platforms, you really do get an entire solution that you can build your business on. And I think over the year, this working on it, and you can build an entire operation just inside a pretty simple Office 365 tenant.
Yeah.
That's fairly functional.
Yeah.
Like you can do a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
you can build a very
you can
simple.
track your finances, you can take care of messaging, you have document storage, you have the
Mhm.
ability to communicate with people at a distance, either through voice or video or simple text chat. So it's not even just having the tools, it's having the tools and the variety of ways to implement them that works with your business.
Right, the mechanisms. That being said, it's hard. it's hard. It's tricky. You have to kind of approach it in a different way than you would have, especially in this hybrid or remote workforce. Is very it's very personal. You have to be much more, I think, direct with who you
Mhm.
work with. At times, you can't beat around the bush in a way that, which is like there's a lot of things missing, like that. There's certain non-visual, uh, non-verbal
Body
cues,
language is one
body
thing.
language. Things just
Yeah.
don't come across, even with video.
Mhm.
Uh, and I think that you guys
Yeah.
have to practice it like anything else. It's a skill.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Absolutely is a skill, and it's a skill that's going to bring us to our last topic for the day, or last segment of what we're going to be talking about, and that's where we go from here. Like you said, it's a skill that needs to be practiced, and it's a skill that's going to play a large role in, personally, the success of businesses moving forward. I mean, like right now, there's a lot of talk going around about the Great Resignation. And personally, I like to refer to it as the Great Reshuffling more than anything else, because it is people finding places where they think they belong, where
Yeah.
it's a better fit, where
Yeah.
the
Right.
company culture is one that embraces their thoughts and is aligned with what they want to do with themselves. Even if they are not in the same room as people, at least we know that they have a common bond with regards to goals and ambitions. And that's going to lead to changes, and they're going to be changes that aren't so much about compensation. It's not so much about the paycheck. Yes, it's always important, we have mortgages and bills and other things to pay, but it's going to be about feeling engaged in the workplace and feeling like you're actually contributing to something that's important.
Also, there's a big. I mean, there's just so many changes. Like people. There's older generations of folks that are actually retiring at this point, even knowledge workers. So it's creating like a vacuum of work. There's new work that no one people anticipated, but it's legitimately like hard to fill. I mean,
Oh yeah.
just in our field, I mean, any kind of security
Yeah.
related work is complicated, takes years. It's not something you can learn like in the 6-week course.
So that's why you see those job descriptions where it's like, I need a junior security admin with 15 years experience.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you can't, it's, there's a
It's not
lot
how
to
it
learn.
works.
You
It's
learn
not
a
how any of this
component of
works.
it, but to be a practitioner of any kind of architecture level or kind of policy level, you have to learn a lot of different pieces of it and
Yeah.
actually have worked in it and, understand it. So it's hard. Right. And at the same time, we're working on once again, these soft skills of like communicating through video, and maybe you're communicating through video and in person at the same time. That's
Mhm.
hard to do that well and do it
Yeah.
consistently day in, day out.
Yeah.
How do you manage someone
Yeah.
that you've never met?
Mhm.
Exactly right, Drew. It's like 10 years experience. And those who has experience, I mean, how many people, if you look at those statistics, only 3% of people had a permanent work from home or remote work. How do you find managers and leaders who are good at managing and leading remote
Mhm.
people when now all of a sudden you have a huge 30% change shift?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
these are millions of people. This is not like insignificant numbers. I mean, percentages don't always reveal absolute numbers,
Oh yeah,
but
percentage is just a relative number, but when you look at the scale that it represents,
right. What's
it's just
what's the
entire.
total American workforce? 200 million people, 150 million people.
Yeah,
30% of that is what? 50 million? A little less. You know what I mean? It's a significant portion of people and skills and learning learning a new vocabulary, if that makes sense.
absolutely.
Yeah.
They also, and just gonna throw this out here because it's Thursday. I just had, like, I think it Captain Kangaroo that did the thing where he had each one of his viewers send him $1.
I think it was.
Like, hey, if you're part of that 33%, confirm it by sending me $1 today. Ah, there we go. I'm set for life. I'm gonna resign now. But
That was the whole point of this stream.
that was the whole setup. The stream
The
was just
long con.
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
yeah, soft skills are going to become more and more important, and so are things like feedback. And I don't know, George. I'd love to hear your opinion on this. How, because I know that since we've gone remote, feedback and talking with people and having conversations how to make things better has been very high on your priority. Do
Sure.
you feel that team members are the same way? Like there's been an increase in the willingness to give feedback? I feel like that I don't mean to make that like a loaded question, but I think
No,
it's curious.
it's funny. The people that were not afraid beforehand are even less afraid now, if that makes sense. Like, I think that you feel more. I think you have, I think you're speaking more to people directly than you had in the past.
Yeah.
And I think in the past, in pre-pandemic times, you would see someone in the office kind of chit chat for a couple minutes and kind of that'd be that. But I think now it's more deliberate, and people who give people who are good at feedback or freely give feedback or give it more easily. People who don't give it haven't really shifted. I think you have to kind of suss it out of them in a more direct way. I think it's kind of, once again, like if your goal is to manage folks and kind of lead and give them kind of direction and collaborate with them on that direction, you have to kind of ask the right questions as opposed to assume. I find sometimes even myself, like I'll assume that someone understood something, and it would have been maybe very easily or more apparent in person. But now, since we're working remotely, you have to be like, is this what's going to happen? Do we have, are we setting expectations together? And I think we have to be really deliberate in the language in a way that so much so that I think that something I've been working on is like a glossary and a definition of words.
Yeah.
Because I find that even I'll say something and then I ask you and you're like, I think it means this, and then I ask Megan, she's like, I think it means that.
Yeah,
And,
I mean, look,
we were in the same company. We work together every day.
we were talking about tools the other day, and I referred to what do you call it? Line testing tool?
It was
finding cables.
I call it tone probe, and you call it a fox and a hound. I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it was just like we were talking completely different languages, and it's because that we came into the workplace at different times. We had mentors, probably in different generations,
correct?
And it had a huge influence on us. But it was cool because it actually goes to one of the last points here. Leaders will increase the importance of both professional and personal development. That was an interesting thing to see, our own professional developments being parallel, but having those differences.
Right.
So that was my terrible transition into this area. But yeah, education for the workplace, professional development is something that's become much more, I don't want to say important. I think it's always been important, but to me, it's become much more apparent. I'm seeing a lot more people really get out there and push it. It's something that you've done for the staff here. And I mean, I just, on behalf of the staff, thank you. That's a big perk of working here, is that encouragement.
Well, this field requires a constant reinvestigation and reinvestment in yourself and group knowledge. And if you're not doing that, you're not going to deliver. You're selling yourself short, really, in some ways, because there's so many new things coming out every day. I mean, actually, it's overwhelming. You have to kind of know how to pick and choose. That's a skill unto itself. Knowing what not to look at.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Finally, the last idea that we had here with regards to what to expect in the future is that, hybrid work is here to stay. This is
right.
We always talk about the new normal. This is just the normal, period. It is what it is now.
Exactly. I mean, it's something we see time and time. It's literally going to be, we fast forward a very quick number of years, and now we're in the instead of it being 10 years of getting used to it, we did it in a year, and now we're digesting it for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
And understanding the social norms of it, the methodologies for leadership, how to grow a company in this environment. And like anything else, it won't stay the same, but this won't go away. This is not like some kind of temporary thing. This is real.
The internet is not a fad. Like,
not a fad, exactly.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It'll be gone someday. Trust me.
Kind of like the internet. No one needs this thing. It doesn't make any sense. But it's we've been moving that way for a long time. Just knowing it's different tech companies and different folks. But I think that people who never would have done it 2 years ago now are really doing it day in, day out. And I think a lot of people are happy to do it. I mean,
flexibility, life quality, like it's just
it can be better. But I think what we should talk about next week, I think at the advance, some compliance and so how to collaborate better, because I think that too much collaboration is not a good thing either. No. It's an extreme. It's extreme, and extremes are almost always bad.
Yes,
I love it. We're going to talk collaboration, compliance, and we're going to get etiquette in there as well, because you want to make sure you're doing things the right way.
I love etiquette.
From a compliance standpoint, making sure you're not sharing data over, say, networks that you shouldn't when you're communicating with others. And it's also nice to be someone that people look forward to talking with, because your etiquette is something that's enjoyable and it's not off-putting to get a message. I'll say that I'm guilty of that. I hit people with like half-baked ideas and they're just like, please stop.
Matt, you never have, Matt, you never have half-baked ideas, Matt. Either do I.
You stick a toothpick in my idea, it's going to come out a little messy.
Definitely some red velvet cake that's not fully cooked at times.
Exactly. And we'll get into a little bit of that next week. In fact, you know what we'll do? Given that I think that sometimes firsthand experience is the best way to kind of express ideas, we'll talk about my monolithic emails, which I think have gotten a bit of a reputation around the company.
There are walls of text.
It's random words.
Always fun. Always interesting.
Sometimes I'll admit, sometimes you look, you're like, that's a lot of reading. Okay. Oh, is there TLDR?
I write those in the hopes that you just say yes to whatever it is, and I get like a whole bunch of things to get approved.
There
and
it
sneaks through the cracks.
Yeah. It's like, when they bring a new bill in, they put all the pork in there. They load the bill up. So it's kind of like that.
Yeah, I'm sneaky, and I'll explain some of my tricks and tricks.
Yeah, that's actually what we're going to talk about.
But I think it's more important that we close off the show because we've been here for over 40 minutes. But I think that just kind of reflects how interesting of a topic this is. And also, it was a little treat too. And technology is honestly what we live and breathe. But it is nice to kind of like take that step back every now and then and not have to delve into the world of version numbers and vulnerabilities and everything else. So this was a really enjoyable thing to do, and I'm looking forward to it next week. If you joined us late and you'd like to know who we are, we're Valiant Technology, and you can visit us at thevaliantway.com. And of course, our YouTube channel is chock full of videos, recordings of our streams, webinars, tutorials, how-tos, me just randomly talking about technology with other folks. It's a lot of fun to just kind of get lost in. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us. We have a question and answer form, which hopefully I can find the link to. There we go. Sometimes I can't see them. And if you have a question related to technology, particularly if you're working at a small business, please reach out. We love getting questions, and we love doing whatever we can to answer them.
Yeah.
And with all that said, I hope everyone has a great week. We'll see you next week to talk about collaboration, compliance, and etiquette, which is an interesting combo I'm looking forward to doing. And that's it. So everyone, have a great week.
Exactly. Thanks, everyone.
Everyone have a great
weekend.
weekend.
Bye now.